TV Crazy Man here. In this video, I put together some awesome 50s and 60s TV fun facts, funny goofs, and bloopers from the last few videos that I've put together over the last couple of months. We'll visit old favorites such as the Andy Griffith Show, Car 54 Where Are You?, The Wild Wild West, I Love Lucy, Jonny Quest, The Lone Ranger, and much more. Up first, the 1950s classic TV series, The Honeymooners, a show where many mistakes, goofs, and bloopers were kept in and actually made the show even better. Watch Art Carney break out laughing at Jackie Gleason in this scene. Well, you can't really blame him for laughing too much. Also from this episode, if you thought Norton's hero Captain Video was made up just for this episode, you'd be wrong. Captain Video was actually a very popular sci-fi series of the 1950s that unfortunately has only a few episodes that have survived.
Two sound pledge to obey my mommy and daddy.
Let me have it. I wish I had a stand to put it on. Let me have it, huh?
In the episode The Golfer, Gleason had to work for this pincushion joke. Carney was supposed to hand the pincushion to him before setting it down so Ralph could get stuck with the pins that weren't really there.
Take the pins out.
He loves me. He loves me now.
Will you stop with that? Now, how are we going to get an audience to believe that?
Of course, back then on those small TV sets, needles would be invisible anyway. On the episode Better Living Through TV, Ralph is selling an all-purpose kitchen gadget. Part of the prop unexpectedly flies off, and Gleason, like the pro that he was, easily ad-libs it right into the show.
Maybe we ought to say something about spearfishing. Pow! Right in the kiss! Zip, zip, finished.
According to what I've read, Gleason ad-libbed knocking over the set wall during filming this scene. In this episode, Trixie and Alice are about to get on an elevator, but it looks like somebody's already there. If I didn't know any better, I would think they were trying to hide. Probably just a crew member. Probably.
Well, my heart's been in my mouth ever since I heard. I can't stop shaking.
RX.
I read Art Carney ad-libbed the phrase RX here in this scene, which would explain the authentic look of surprise on the other actor's face. You really had to be fast to work with Carney. On the episode Something Fishy, the lodge meeting features a couple of line bloopers that the actors ad-libbed their way out of.
Brother Cramden, Brother Norton is a nut.
There must be plenty of eligible
Applicant.
I always thought that Gleason got his line mixed up here on purpose because Ralph was supposed to be nervous, but a lot of people think it was just yet another flub that somehow just fit in perfectly into the mood of the scene.
Bowling bag ball. I mean a bowling ball bag.
I do think that Gleason's method of limited to no rehearsals and his general spontaneity really gave life to the show. I mean, who in real life speaks in perfect sentences anyway? Well, definitely not me.
Not in the top hand, drawer.
It must be there.
I'm through, Mrs. Cranston. You're through. I'm through, Mrs. Cranston. You're through.
I'll just turn it up full. Cooking twice the time. I'll just turn it up full. Cooking twice the time.
Ralph, how could it? You know who I mean. How could he?
When you win, then you always start yelling and screaming at me. When you win, then you always start yelling and screaming at me.
Wish I could think of something to say to her.
In the episode The Man from Space, a piece falls off of Ralph's costume, creating yet another ad-lib opportunity for Gleason.
There's one question I'd like to ask you.
Let me have that. That's my denaturizer.
Hey, I've seen this one. This is a classic.
On the episode A Matter of Record, Norton records Ralph's apology to Alice. But it must have been a miracle if she got it finally, because he never managed to actually plug up the recorder.
This is old Buttercup.
Even when Norton faints, he hates losing his hat.
I'm through, Mrs. Cranston. You're through. Will you help me out of here?
You know, I think the Cramdens are so poor that they couldn't afford glass in their windows.
Box set.
You know, sometimes props work too well. I think this one bopped Jackie Gleason in the nose.
Box set. They really come out of there, don't they?
Check out how Jackie Gleason handles this scene where a backstage crew member was unable to stop the house phone buzzer noise in time.
Hello?
In the episode Head of the House, they faced a very stubborn door. First Alice comes in and it doesn't want to shut all the way. Then Carney exits and tries to slam it shut. Then right before another actor comes in, the door seems to magically shut on its own. Then that actor comes in and the door is open again. There's just some days when nothing seems to work right. In the episode Mama Loves Mambo, Art Carney walks in too soon on a scene. And it's easy to see that he's kind of mad that he jumped the gun. Unless he's just mad at the door, and we know what kind of problems they had with that door. And he has to stand there awkwardly until Ralph and Alice are done with their arguing, which would have been about where he should have came in at. You know, the Honeymooners had a lot of memorable catchphrases and lines that we all know by heart.
Bang, zoom! Bang, zoom! Bang, zoom! Bang, zoom! You wanna go to the moon? Do you wanna go to the moon? You're gonna go to the moon, but it's gonna be in the moon! Oh, you're a riot, Alice! You're a riot, Alice! A real riot, you are!
Heads I win, tails you lose. Right?
You're the king of your castle! I'm the king here, remember that! This house is my castle! I'm the king! Get him! Everybody! Ow! Get him! Ow! Pow! Right in the kiss!
Baby, you're the greatest. Baby, you're the greatest. Baby, you're the greatest.
I was telling you, Ralph, that I love you.
Baby, you're the greatest. I'm a mope, but I love you, sweetheart. You're the greatest.
Here's one I bet you forgot or never knew existed. There was a pretty good Honeymooners parody rap song by Joe Piscopo and Eddie Murphy back in 1985 on his New Jersey album.
What's the matter, Ralph? I told my boss I'm great at golf.
Did you know the last surviving cast member, Joyce Randolph, who played Dorton's wife Trixie, recently passed away in January of 2024 at the age of 99? Did you know that Jackie Gleason actually considered suing over the similarities between the Flintstones and the Honeymooners? But he changed his mind because he didn't want to be the guy that yanked the much-loved Flintstones off the air. It was just way too much negative publicity. TV Crazy Man here with some crazy goofs and fun facts from the Wild Wild West TV series of the 1960s. Also, find out how the Wild Wild West may have affected Batman and Star Trek. In the very first episode of the series, James West is on the train loading up before heading out into town. Looks like he changed shirts while riding his horse. Might have been easier to change shirts on the train. In the episode, The Night of the Deadly Bed, we see that Jim West is made out of steel. When West lifts a solid steel beam and it hits his leg, it seems like it would have hurt. Unless it wasn't really made of steel. Now, I'm not saying for sure because it's possible he just ignored the pain and went on with the scene. If it was real, I bet he had a pretty good sized bruise the next day. Now, acting back then was pretty painful. As we know, Robert Conrad did do at least most of his own stunts, resulting in a hospital stay once. I wonder if Robert Conrad did this stunt from the episode The Night of the Burning Diamond.
According to my calculations.
I kinda doubt it. Sure does look like an awful fun stunt to do though, doesn't it?
Figures don't lie.
You know, they say you just can't keep a good man down, but in the episode The Night of the Glowing Corpse, they really meant it. Philip Hine plays Lieutenant Renard, who is seen at the beginning of the episode talking to Artemis. Then later on he's found by West, deceased in a coffin. But then at the end of the episode, West walks by him and Artemis talking again in the exact same scene they showed us at the beginning of the episode.
How'd you like that?
Now here's a strange scene in the episode The Night That Terror Stalked the Town. West is in a deserted saloon controlled by the evil Loveless, who's constructed mannequins to fill up the room, but one of the mannequins is actually an actress.
Things aren't always what they seem to be.
I guess they just couldn't get their hands on enough mannequins. She gives herself away when West breaks open a bottle. This next episode, despite containing what I consider to be a few goofs, is a fun episode to watch.
It's not possible.
The episode The Night of the Human Trigger guest stars one of my favorite actors, Burgess Meredith, as basically a Western supervillain who uses his genius-level calculations and well-placed explosions to start earthquakes. This episode aired just a little over a month before his debut as another supervillain, the Penguin, on the 1966 Batman series.
Why do you have to die?
My sentiments exactly.
Just like he would do the Batman and Robin in the very near future, Meredith puts Jim West and Artemis in a deadly trap where, tied up, they will ride down a track to certain doom. Luckily, they devise a plan to escape. By rocking the cart back and forth, they are able to make it fall over before they go into a rock crusher. Of course, knowing that their legs weren't tied up, I had a crazy thought myself. Maybe they could have just, stood up and stepped out of the trap. Of course, that would have been a lot less dramatic.
This little pendulum touches either contact.
Later, West is put into another trap set to explode if he even dares to take a deep breath.
Holy sonic booms!
But luckily, it doesn't go off when Burgess Meredith appears to trip over the line. And you could even hear the pendulum smack one of the metal contacts, which was supposed to set off the earthquake in the explosion. Intentional or not, either way, it adds humor to an already funny episode, which, being a very humorous episode to start with, they could afford to leave this scene in one way or the other. Now for this scene, I've never been in an earthquake, but somehow I doubt you could just calmly stand around when one has started without at least losing your balance just a little bit. Now you can correct me if I'm wrong on this one in the comments.
Hope springs eternal.
In the episode, The Night of the Torture Chamber, we see just how strong Jim West is when he leaves a dent in a brick wall with a guard's head. In the episode, The Night of the Druid's Blood, comedian Don Rickles guest stars as a bad guy, villainous looking mustache and all. Too bad he can't keep the mustache on. Even funnier is how they gave him a close-up just as he starts to lose his mustache. I know it's possible it was a joke, but I don't think it was intentional.
Well, that's pretty corny, pal. Yeah.
Rickles faces off against Conrad in a fight scene. I wonder how long it took before he yelled, "Cut! Where's my stuntman?"
You are insolent, aren't you?
Well, it probably didn't take long.
Come on. I dare you.
The episode The Night of the Burning Diamond I think was probably ahead of its time. It features a supervillain who, after drinking a formula of melted diamonds, acquires super speed where he's so fast he becomes invisible to the naked eye. Very good episode, only a couple of goofs here and there to be found if you're looking for them. So in order to show the speedster's powers, all the actors in the area have to freeze where they're at, which you can imagine is kind of hard to do. Now this guy landed on sort of an awkward position to hold for long, and you can see him wobbling.
Then we're invulnerable. There's no danger to us. It's that odd sound, almost like clicking.
So at super speed, when people talk, it sounds just like a Star Trek communicator to a speedster. And remember, this was a couple of months before Star Trek premiered.
Bridge, this is the captain.
TV Crazy Man here. In this video, we look at some funny goofs and bloopers from the classic TV series, I Love Lucy. These goofs and bloopers made it to the final cut, and in many cases, made the show even funnier. On I Love Lucy, second takes were rare as they wanted the audience reaction and the performances to be fresh. so they often film straight through minor dialogue bloopers. These bloopers either blend in or just added to comedy as if they were scripted, such as the time Ricky was entertaining some of his Cuban pals and had to translate so Lucy could join in.
Certainly is nice.
Lucy quiere que le diga.
Desi forgets where he's at and repeats what Lucy says in English.
Lucy wants to know if you had it. Oh, fine. Lucy wants to know if you had it. Oh, fine.
I guess being married to Lucy not only can drive you crazy, it can make you mess up your lines too. In this scene, Desi accidentally fell, but the audience loved it so much he decided to do it 2 more times on purpose. Now some bloopers would slip right past you, like when Ricky says, "They want us to meet us."
I wonder why they want us to meet us here at the apartment.
Now I have to be honest, I probably would never have noticed that one if it hadn't been mentioned on the I Love Lucy DVD Flub special feature.
I wonder why they want us to meet us here at the apartment.
You see, dear, the Mertzes don't get excited. There's nothing to get upset about. You see, dear, the Mertzes don't get excited. There's nothing to get upset about.
Hey, Fred, say your letter, Lucy. Goodbye.
Did Fred just call Ricky Lucy?
Hey, Fred, say your letter, Lucy. Goodbye. Hey, Fred, say your letter, Lucy. Goodbye. Alumni that comes back from the homecoming.
According to the I Love Lucy Season 3 DVD special features, many of Ricky's botched pronunciation jokes were scripted, but this one was an actual blooper.
Well, that's as close as I can get to that one. Anyway.
And yes, if you watch my videos long enough, you probably have a list a mile long of my oh my goofs. When William Frawley fumbles on his line just a little bit,
I guess you can dance just as well.
Lucy throws in an ad-libbed line.
You're more nervous than
Yes, I know.
Yes, ma'am. Now how much you gonna need? How much you gonna be? Ma'am, now how much you gonna need? How much you gonna be?
In this scene, Desi was so busy laughing that Lucy had to ad-lib a line just to remind him to answer the phone.
The phone, honey.
Oh.
You know, I wonder how much fussing that Vivian Vance did after this scene was over.
Alright, wait a minute.
On the episode, Lucy thinks Ricky is trying to murder her. One of the cameras doesn't get out of the way fast enough. You know, I wonder if Lucy knows that she has a wall missing.
Lucy, what's going on?
Ay, 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 man.
Oh!
Isn't it kind of funny how the Ricardo's carpet just sort of ends in the middle of the living room?
Ricky, time to get up, dear.
Ricky better get up. It looks like there's a strange man hovering around in the bedroom.
Time to get up, dear.
Now, if you've ever noticed a strange flash on old TV shows, it's either an audience member taking a photo or possibly an alien from Mars zapping the crew behind the scenes. I think I'm going with the alien theory.
Okay.
When Lucy and the gang panic and fire at the door, thinking that crooks are coming in after them, I noticed the door is kind of thin. I mean, they could have been a lot safer if they just got a real door. I mean, that one looks like it's made out of cardboard or something. I mean, look how thin it is.
Hiya, Tom.
Oh, howdy.
In this scene, the director of photography wanted the coffee table to be visible, but a later wide-angle shot exposed the fact that they had put the table up on blocks.
Well, this gang ain't big enough for the both of us.
Hey, Ross. Yeah? Where's that girl that's supposed to do the commercial? I can't find her. Hey, Ross. Yeah? Where's that girl that's supposed to do the commercial? I can't find her.
Lucy and Ricky are handcuffed together, so Ricky takes off his tie before they go to sleep. But when they wake up in the morning in the same predicament, I wonder why Ricky bothered to put his tie back on. This scene, Ricky and Lucy are alone in the apartment, but when they go into the bedroom, what in the world is Fred doing there all of a sudden? I knew there was something strange about that guy.
You unlock this door with the key of imagination. Beyond it is another dimension.
As Lucy begins to nod off, Notice the relatively clean underside of this card table, and later when Fred and Ethel walk in, someone has wrote mysterious numbers on the back of this same table. But who?
You've just crossed over into the Twilight Zone.
In this scene, Ricky is trying to do a screen test and Lucy's getting fussed at by a director. But strangely, in the background, we see Lucy's kitchen. Now Lucy's teaching Ethel to drive.
See? Yeah. No, there's nothing to it, really.
And we're led to believe that Ethel goofed up and wrecked the car. But further investigation reveals that Ethel was set up, as you can see a cable actually pulling the car into the accident.
Believe it or not.
Now notice in this scene Lucy's light colored coat. And she must take that thing off at super speed because when she gets out of the car it's gone. And just the very second she gets back in the car, she's got that coat on again.
Drive on.
In this scene, Lucy is doing a number with Ricky and Bob Hope. And in this number, her shoes have spikes that have picked up tiles from off the floor. But as soon as the shot switches at the very end, the tiles have just vanished from her shoes. I know, you're probably thinking that's not such a big deal. But what about when little Ricky disappeared on a boat in the waters around Florida? Little Ricky is right there until Big Ricky jumps off the boat. And then the attention is on Big Ricky and little Ricky has just vanished. You know, it makes me wonder how close is Miami to the Bermuda Triangle? Keep your eyes on that hat. After Ricky throws it to Uncle Alberto, it sits on the table. Until the hat decides it doesn't want to be there anymore. Then the hat returns. All's well that ends well, and the hat is back to brand new. In this scene, Lucy gets too close to the backdrop and moves the entire outdoors. TV Crazy Man here. In this video, I take you through Car 54. Where are you?
Car 54, where are you?
With some super funny goofs from one of the most hilarious shows of the early 1960s, and lots of amazingly awesome fun trivia facts. Can you guess the name of the Car 54 actor that was into wrestling, weightlifting, and martial arts? He once broke Robert Redford's nose. Plus, why did Car 54 have so much in common with the Phil Silvers Sergeant Bilko show? And lots more.
What are you guys, mice or men?
In the episode, The Taming of Lucille, I think the fabric of space and time is unraveling. Keep your eye on the phone as Gunter talks to his wife Lucille.
Ow! Lucille, what is it? Quiet.
So while Gunter is pretending to still have Lucille on the other line, the phone itself seems to change back and forth from a 60s phone to a 1930s phone.
No bowling tonight, fellas. Don't ask me why. I'm too upset.
You know, if you look into the series, one of the frequent storylines was mind games and the effects of gaslighting on groups of people. I wonder if they were playing mind games with us on this one.
You're probably imagining a lot of things that don't even happen.
A man named Robert L. Ripley dared us to
Believe it or not.
Captain, don't you realize the horror of it? Two of your men merging as one brain.
I wish I could have found a clip where that was actually happening. Sometimes on the show, you could tell that they would record from two different camera angles and then put it together.
Some girl just lonesome for someone who can understand her.
Well,
For some reason, they spelled Tootie's name different here.
Getting to be a regular golden treasury of useless information.
Do you mind?
Am I the only beautiful woman in the whole world?
In this angle, Gunter and the movie star are sitting where their shoulders overlap, and then for the close-ups, they appear spread out.
Oh, excuse me, Miss Tangiers.
In this episode, this genius Boy Scout helps the police solve crimes. Can you imagine being a kid and working with these guys and not cracking up?
Ask him about the convertible debenture. Now, what about the convertible debenture? Ask him about the convertible debenture. Now, what about the convertible debenture?
I'm your brother.
It's true.
In this scene, Al Lewis keeps going back and forth from a totally glazed over look to a blinking and nodding and back again.
They'll ruin everything we knew and loved over my dead body.
In this episode, the crooks can't seem to connect their punches.
If it wasn't for you, Sergeant Little, I would have left him for good years ago.
Wait, what'd she say? That's Sergeant McBride, played by Jimmy Little, not Sergeant Little.
If it wasn't for you, Sergeant Little.
And now for Car 54, Where Are You? The Facts. The series had various different intros, each with a different gag. There was the handcuffs gag,
Car 54.
the ice cream salute, the crazy kissing bandit mask, lunch,
Car 54 where?
the snake charmer, the spider, and sunglasses gag. The show's two main stars were Joe E. Ross as Tootie Gunter and Fred Gwynn as Francis Muldoon. Ross brought over his ooh, ooh, ooh catchphrase from the Phil Silver Show, also known as Sergeant Bilko.
There they are. Ooh, we saw them. Right this way, Mac. Ooh, it's one of them. It's one of them. I'll tell them to go. Ooh, 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 ooh. Ooh, 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 ooh. Here's the turkey. Ooh, 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 ooh. I just remembered. Ooh, do you mind? Do you mind? Ooh, ooh, wait, I got a better idea. Ooh, ooh, wait like till Lucille. Ooh, ooh. Will you shut up? Ooh, ooh. Do you mind? Ooh, ooh. Ooh, ooh. Henry, you nitwit! Henry!
I read that Ross started his ooh, ooh catchphrase after he was trying to remember his lines once and he needed a second or two. And, of course, his second catchphrase was, do you mind?
Do you mind? Do you mind? Do you mind? Do you mind? Do you mind? Do you mind? Do you mind? Do you mind?
You must say these words. Klaatu, Barada, Nikto.
Did you know that Ross actually deciphered what Klaatu, Barada, Nikto means?
Klaatu, Nikta, Baroda.
Well, almost.
It means crispy crunchies are good for you.
Ross's next TV series was It's About Time, where he played a caveman in a world that looked a lot like Gilligan's Island. It even had the same laugh track and music cues. Ross's TV wife, played by Beatrice Pons from Sergeant Bilko, followed him over to Car 54 as his wife with a different name.
Gunther, are you out of your mind?
Nat Hiken created Car 54 and wrote for the show. He'd previously produced the Phil Silver Show in New York, otherwise known as Sergeant Bilko. Hiken recruited many of the old Bilko stars for Car 54. Joe E. Ross, of course, was a regular, and Fred Gwynn had appeared twice on the Bilko show, and other actors from the show were Paul Reed, Al Lewis, Charlotte Ray, Jimmy Little, Jack Healy, Frederick O'Neill, Martha Greenhouse, Bob Hastings, Billy Sands, and Gerald Hiken.
Of course, movies don't lie. They're not allowed to. They got a motion picture code.
Fred Gwynn played Tootie Gunter's partner, Francis Muldoon, an intellectual with a long face that was the subject of jokes on the show quite a few times.
Look at me. I'm 6'6", and 5'6" of me is face.
You know something, Francis?
What?
You do have lovely eyes.
You know what they call me in grammar school? Horse face.
And all you're doing is sitting there looking into my lovely eyes. I mean, you're not paying any attention.
What do you see?
I see the same old horse face I've been looking at for the last 10 years.
Rub some cream in my face. It'll be a mess by tonight.
We created a Frankenstein.
Of course, he and Al Lewis would go on to play in the Munsters, whereas Herman, his face would scare almost everybody around him.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Imagine that poor girl coming all the way from Scranton, Pennsylvania and running into this.
Car 54, where are you?
Future Munsters character, Grandpa, actor Al Lewis, of course, played Officer Leo Schnauzer. When Lewis first appeared on the series, it was as another character named Al Spencer. Officer Schnauzer didn't show up until episode 13. Put it in the bank.
This is Patrolman Leo Schnauzer again. My wife's got me talking to myself.
Leo's wife was played by Charlotte Rae, best known for the 80s show Facts of Life and Different Strokes.
Of course, you know my conditions. $1,000 a week, my choice of leading man, my choice of director.
One of my favorite episodes featuring both characters was What Happened to Thursday. You see, every Thursday, Leo gets in a fight with his wife, so Officer Tootie gets the idea of convincing Leo that Thursday is Friday, and before long everyone has skipped a day. It goes to show you just can't believe everything you read in the paper. The episode is basically a giant case of gaslighting.
And then that movie, Gaslight.
A term I believe was coined back in '38 with a play and then a popular movie in 1944. Now this is a hilarious, brilliant episode. It just makes you wonder, how easy is it to convince a mass audience a false narrative? It's actually kind of scary when you think about it. Al Lewis would one day return to his role as an older Leo, along with the other original actor from the series, Nipsey Russell, on the 1994 Car 54 movie that is best described as disappointing.
Car 54, where are you?
Can you guess which of the regular cast of Car 54 was into weight training, nutrition, and martial arts, and is still alive today at 92 years old? He's been on Dukes of Hazzard, Max Headroom, Airwolf, Knight Rider, Dragnet. He's done voice work on Garfield and G.I. Joe. He accidentally broke Robert Redford's nose on the movie 3 Days of the Condor. He thought Redford was going to have him fired, but he just laughed it off, and apparently Redford thought that the fight scene turned out great. It's Hank Garrett who played Officer Ed Nicholson on Car 54.
Nicholson. Have you ever been to his house? He's got 5 kids, a screaming wife, and a barking dog.
I'm a single man. You're a bum.
You know, to this day, no one knows for sure if Ed Nicholson was married and had kids or if he was indeed a bachelor. Things like this create more Mandela effects.
He's got 5 kids, a screaming wife, and a barking dog.
Now, Garrett grew up poor, and he ran around with a gun in his pocket at the age of 12. And wildly enough, the mayor of Harlem introduced him to Sammy Davis Jr., who gave him a job and set him straight. Davis said to Garrett when Garrett was only 12, "So you're a tough guy. You know tough guys only wind up with broken bones and scars. The way you're headed, you're going to end up in prison or die."
4 years we've been together, you bum. And never once, you bum, have you come to my house for dinner, bum.
When Garrett got an audition with Nat Hiken, Nat looked at him and said, "You're Ed Nicholson," right off the bat, you know. And to which Garrett replied, "No, I'm Hank Garrett." Hiken replied back, "Just the kind of dummy I'm looking for. You're hired."
That's the stupidest thing as I've ever heard.
Captain Block was played by Paul Reed.
What, are you signing in or are you writing a novel?
Poor Captain Block. He had such a wacky precinct to run.
That's slavery!
Come on, Charlie!
This precinct is falling apart.
Reed passed away in 2007, living to the age of 97 years old. He was happily married to the same woman for nearly 60 years. There were some famous faces that came through the show, like David Doyle from Charlie's Angels, Dana Elcar from MacGyver, and Tom Bosley from Happy Days. But my favorite of the bunch was Larry Storch, who went on to play on another favorite show of mine, F Troop.
Stop! Who says I'm dumb? Happy New Year!
Hey, guard, where are you going?
To spread the word in that temple of wickedness!
Storch did a lot of funny bits on alcohol and drinking. On Car 54, he appeared as Charlie the Drunk. Charlie only needed to pretend to drink to get drunk.
Like that for a dime. Boom, boom, boom. All glass. Turn it by, you're shot free. Boom! The Lorelei Lounge. There's a good bar. That bar's got heart.
Repent, you sinners, repent! Sit down that bottle of demon rum! Don't give in to temptation!
He did have a great way with words, though.
Not during our month-end sale. I said, here comes Jane, and she looks pale.
What's going on?
You got your shack back! I gotta meet a fellow. It's really business. Believe me, fellas, it's business. I gotta have a shot. You guys are killing me like me, Charlie. Come on.
Storch was on Car 54 4 times. He played Charlie 3 times and a crook named Pinky once. Did you know that Joey Ross appeared as Mr. Hyde on Larry Storch's Saturday morning TV series, The Ghostbusters, in 1975? Did you know they painted the police cars red to avoid anyone thinking it was a real police car? Thankfully it didn't matter as the show was in black and white.
A man of your age shouldn't be reading comic books.
These ain't ordinary comic books.
Did you know Car 54 had its own comic book series? Lasted about 7 issues. TV Crazy Man here with more hilarious goofs from the Andy Griffith Show, featuring Ron Howard's real-life dad, ghostly apparitions, a spooky goober goof, and much more.
The corner down there.
Right. Don, hold it right there!
On the episode, The Big House, just before Barney jumps out from behind the crate to surprise these 2 cops in the alley that he thinks are criminals, you can hear what sounds like the director shout out Don to give actor Don Knotts his cue when to jump out. Not completely sure, but that is what it sounds like to me. What do you think?
The corner down there.
Right. Don, hold it right there!
The corner down there.
Right. Don, hold it right there!
On the episode A Black Day from Mayberry, 2 treasure agents come into the courthouse. They take off their hats while they're waiting for Andy. One of them is played by Rance Howard, Ron Howard's dad in real life. Now watch what happens when Opie walks into the courthouse.
Where's Pa?
Yes, Opie, where is Pa? Well, don't worry, Rance will be back in just a second. Now, I did read that something came up and Rance had to replace the actor, actually. But it didn't say what that something was, just sort of indicated that it may have been something serious. Do you remember the drunk chicken from the episode Aunt Bee the Crusader?
That rooster's got the blind staggers.
I have evidence that the chicken was not actually drunk with moonshine. If you look to your right, you'll see a string that someone was actually using to pull the chicken's head around. I guess they couldn't get the chicken to do this on its own for extra worms or something. You know, I hear that chicken unions are pretty tough to deal with. Remember when Barney got a motorcycle? Here's one that I read that a lot of people think is a goof, but I think I have a simple explanation for it. You see, some folks think that the sidecar just tore off because it was so old, and that was the joke. And the goof is the blocks of wood that we clearly see that are holding up the sidecar that Andy is sitting on. But I always figured the old guys were just playing a prank on Barney and they were the ones that put the blocks of wood there. But unless my eyes are deceiving me or Don Knotts got about 15 years younger, that doesn't look like he was the one riding away. Let me know what you think in the comments.
Goggles, any foreign objects in eyes, that is gravel and or bugs.
Now Barney, those goggles aren't going to stop any bugs without the safety lens. You'd think he would have known that when he popped himself in the eye. You know, you have no idea how many times I kept saying googles instead of goggles. Well, some folks would have never let me live that one down.
You beat everything, you know that.
You know, I think Ernest broke a window made out of paper, because glass doesn't blow around in the wind. Now you might say that it went through the curtain, and the curtain was made out of paper. Now personally, I've never had curtains that were made of paper, so I don't know.
Nah, you're gold. Cold! You're cold!
Now you gotta love the episode Divorce Mountain Style. I mean, this is one of my favorites. Not only do we get Denver Powell, aka Uncle Jesse from the Dukes of Hazzard, but we also get Bob Denver from Gilligan's Island. In this scene, we hear Bob Denver supposedly pecking on the window. But when Andy closes the blinds on Bob, it looks to me that it might have hit him right on the nose, which of course means there was no window there at all. Y'all see any glass there?
Why think?
Are you batty?
Well, Barney, I just wanted to know if you seen the window or not.
All right, just for that, no more Mr. Nice Guy.
Okay, maybe it was a dumb question. Later in the episode, Andy and Barney are in a barn, getting ready to put Barney on a horse. It's all part of a plot to trick the Darlings so Charlene will get back with her husband Dud. But if they are alone, then where did that hand come from?
Strange, the bizarre, the unexpected.
Believe it or not.
You folks aren't from Mayberry, North Carolina.
Yeah, you heard of it?
In the episode Taylor's in Hollywood, this bus seems to jump forward in time and space right between two sentences of a conversation. In the episode, Aunt Bee learns to drive. I think they tried to cover up the fact the stuntman is driving for Aunt Bee by putting a hat on her. Poor old Goober, I don't think he got a stuntman. Of course, why did Andy think it was a good idea to let somebody named Goober teach his Aunt Bee how to drive?
Am I close enough to the curb? Am I close enough to the curb?
Of course, Aunt Bee hits a tree later on.
Oh, please, please don't tell Andy.
Oh, okay, I won't. The car seems to move around by itself afterwards. When Aunt Bee looks at it later, it appears to be away from the tree. Then Andy comes and bumps the car just a little bit, and it's back up next to the tree. Then when he's looking at the car, I can't even tell there's a scratch on it anymore. Now I'm looking on a computer screen right now. If you're looking on a big screen TV, you might see something I'm missing. In the episode The Gypsies, a blanket on a gypsy woman becomes a raincoat almost before our very eyes. Just after the camera switches to Andy, then Aunt Bee, and then back to the Gypsies. Things sometimes happen faster in Mayberry than we give them credit for. On the episode, Goober's Replacement. Goober goes on vacation and his girlfriend fills in for him at the gas station. Andy and Floyd come in, check things out, and find it super busy. Notice the cars that are in line, and that the gray car in the beginning of the line takes off. But much later, when Goober comes back after vacation, the same exact cars are still in line. You know, the guy in the green car could still be there today. Does anybody else think it's strange that Mayberry has paved sidewalks and yet has dirt streets? Couldn't they have at least put some gravel down?
Smart, Alex?
A rock and roll singer comes to Mayberry, and he's really good at playing the guitar, and possibly his shirt. Maybe just the air. I don't know about you, but I'm still trying to figure out how in the world he does that.
Down easy, you know. See ya.
You know, the Darling family was into some spooky stuff with all those hillbilly curses and all that. So it's no surprise that as they drove off once again, we can see ghostly apparitions in Andy's window.
Believe it or not.
Now watch how unbelievably quick that Ron Howard is in this episode.
Uncle, I can play something already.
Some way between Andy and Aunt Bee and the piano, Opie changed shirts. How did he do that?
That's incredible!
Well, I guess I have done a little living in my time. You can say that again.
In the episode, Opie's most unforgettable character, Goober's lips don't move, and he sounds kind of creepy.
You can say that again.
Are we hearing his thoughts? Why did they go back and dub that seemingly non-essential line back in there? Should we be scared?
You can say that again. Good to see you back.
Looks like the thing from the Addams Family is back again. TV Crazy Man here. In this video, I take a look back at the legendary Lone Ranger TV series.
You all alone now. Last man.
Starring Clayton Moore, Jay Silverheels, and John Hart. First, we'll look at some funny goofs and amazing trivia facts you might not have known about this classic TV series that made a masked man a legend on television. So hang on tight, it's going to be a fun ride with amazing stars when they were young and connections to other superhero legends you might not have even guessed.
You are a Lone Ranger. Hold it.
Yeah, I didn't use any editing tricks. That's the way it really happened.
Believe it or not.
Hold it.
Back in the day, they didn't always use stuntmen. Often they just used dummies to do falls, which were usually pretty noticeable. Like when this bad guy from the movie Lone Ranger in the City of Gold falls suddenly. Of course, at least he didn't scream like a girl before turning into a falling dummy like this guy from episode 2 of The Lone Ranger. It is a little confusing as to why they would dub in a woman screaming for this dude. There's nothing more inspiring or iconic than the Lone Ranger's "Hi-Yo Silver Away," but in this ending scene, the signs are all flipped backwards. Now there's a little controversy over whether or not it's "Hi-Ho" or "Hi-Yo," but from what I read, it's definitely "Hi-Yo." Now see, I had to look it up because when I was a kid, I used to always shout "Hi-Yo Silver Away." Notice all the shadows in the backdrop behind the stagecoach. Kind of looks like the stagecoach was just suddenly walled inside of a room. And you know, the best thing about westerns is seeing the great western landscapes, not all the indoor stuff. Oh look, it's Sergeant Schultz from Hogan's Heroes. I mean, the actor John Banner. Now maybe it's not noticeable to the average viewer, but I've seen Hogan's Heroes enough to know that the guy fighting the Lone Ranger in this scene is definitely not Sergeant Schultz. It's gotta be a stunt double. Now in this scene, Tonto's stunt double gets into a fight with a bad guy, and the fight gets so intense that the whole wall almost caves in. Outdoor shot, indoor shot. The giveaway is that Tonto just instantly changes directions on his horse.
Look, masked man, give us a break. I'll make it worth your while.
This episode's pretty neat, as we see the Lone Ranger in a suit, which reminds me of his future relative, the Green Hornet. More on him later in the video. My question out of this episode is, though, just how fast can the Lone Ranger change clothes? You know, maybe the Lone Ranger has more in common with Superman than just a love for justice. More on that later as well.
Truth, justice, and the American way.
Now here's another possible example of some kind of superpower. The Lone Ranger has a disguise on, when suddenly he takes off the unusually large hat and runs off to jump on Silver, but then where was he keeping his regular hat? Did he speed away and grab it somewhere?
Plenty strange.
Not so strange, Tonto. Yeah. The nearest town is Pine Gap. There's a jeweler there.
Yeah, it's pretty small, but you can definitely see a car way out in the distance. This next one I think was created in the download process. I saw it on the Lone Ranger channel on YouTube, which by the way, you can watch all the episodes of the Lone Ranger on. This could be a digital goof, or this could be something really spooky, but it's cool. I'm just not sure. You ever notice how sometimes when they switch from an outdoor to a studio shot that the background just seems to turn into nothing but plain sky? I bet you don't know what kimosabi actually means. Maybe we should just ask the guy who's used the word more than any other man in the history of the universe.
What does kimosabi mean?
Why, you Kimosabi.
And why did he finally leave?
Didn't find out what Kimosabi.
Well, that would do it, yes.
Kimosabi? That sounds familiar.
That's right, Kimosabi. You trusty scout.
The one thing that other versions of the Lone Ranger seem to have forgotten is that John Reed, the Lone Ranger, had previously saved Tonto when they were teens. And Tonto sealed their friendship with the name Kimosabi and a ring that was also a symbol of their friendship. Yeah, Tonto would have never done that. In the 1981 Legend of the Lone Ranger movie, John Reed's parents were killed, and he lived with Tonto's tribe for a bit, and even became Tonto's blood brother.
You will always be Kimosabi, trusted friend.
It means trusty scout. Me never forget you.
Now everybody knows the Lone Ranger gets his silver bullets from his mine, but do you know where the mine was and what the bullets represented?
The Lone Ranger, Jim, and Tonto approached the site of the secret silver mine.
It must have been 10 years ago that my brother, old Jim here, and I discovered the mine and built this shack. It's under the bunk. There.
Yep, one of the richest veins of silver ever found in these here parts.
I want some of the ore cast into silver bullets. Silver bullets will serve as sort of a symbol. A symbol which means justice by law. But I live and fight only to see the eventual defeat and the proper punishment by law of every criminal in the West.
The Lone Ranger was an expert marksman who swore never to kill.
You forget I told you I vowed never to shoot to kill.
The Ranger got Silver, his horse, by saving him from a wild buffalo.
Silver White.
Silver. That would be a name for him.
In 2003, a failed TV pilot of the Lone Ranger made Silver out to be some sort of spirit guide, an idea they carried over to the Disney movie in 2013. I kind of think they should probably just let him be a horse, a really smart horse.
No!
The Lone Ranger's true superpower, and one that puts him up there with the likes of Superman in my book, is his unwavering moral code and dedication to justice.
I happen to believe that when a man's in the right, he has no reason to be afraid.
The masked man is the brother to every law-abiding man, whatever his race or color.
These traits were summed up in the Lone Ranger's creed, created by the men who brought life to the Lone Ranger, George W. Trindle and Fran Stryker, through a radio show in 1933. The creed was repeated many times by Clayton Moore in public appearances. It states,
I believe to have a friend, a man must be one.
We will ride together.
That all men are created equal, and everyone has the right and the power within themselves to help make this a greater world. I believe that God put the firewood on earth, but every man must gather and light it himself.
Every man needs a faith and a symbol to live by.
We must make the best of what equipment that we have. And I believe in being prepared physically, mentally, and morally to fight when necessary for that which is right. I believe that sooner or later, somewhere, somehow, we must settle with this earth and make payment for what we have taken. That this country of the people and by the people and for the people shall live forever. And everything changes, but the truth alone lives on forever. I believe in my Creator.
Build church no matter who try to stop him.
I like his spirit. He sounds like a man who will fight evil no matter how great the odds.
My country, my fellow man.
Did you know there were two Lone Rangers on the original TV series run? John Hart, who had appeared on a couple episodes of The Lone Ranger as a guard and a henchman before playing the Lone Ranger for all of Season 3. By Season 4, Clayton Moore was back. Now, I've heard it said that Moore didn't know why he was fired, and utter speculation that it was over money or a contract dispute. I'm sure everyone has heard the song You Don't Mess Around with Jim that contains the immortal words, you don't tug on Superman's cape or pull the mask off the old Lone Ranger. But there's a lot of other interesting connections to Superman that are pretty cool. On the episode The Beeler Gang, two Superman actors played in the same scene as husband and wife. Robert Rockwell would go on to play Superman's father Jor-El on the first episode of The Adventures of Superman, and Beverly Garland would go on to play the mother of Lois Lane decades later on Lois and Clark, The New Adventures of Superman, for 6 episodes.
Surprise?
Stunned.
Speaking of Lois Lane, The Adventures of Superman Lois Lane actress Noelle Neal guest starred on the episode Letter of the Law, and Phyllis Coates, who played as Lois Lane on The Adventures of Superman's first season, was on 3 different episodes of The Lone Ranger.
It was destroyed by water.
That's where you're wrong again, Miss Prince.
What do you mean?
Dabbs Greer, who was on the very first episode of Superman, appears in one Lone Ranger episode, as does Leave It to Beaver star Hugh Beaumont, that plays in a very memorable episode of Superman and the Lone Ranger.
I don't judge men by what's on their faces. I judge them by what's in their hearts. And I see nothing bad in yours.
Future Dukes of Hazzard stars Denver Powell and James Best both made guest appearances, with Powell appearing in several episodes. I'm sure Dukes and Smallville star John Schneider would have liked to have starred on the Lone Ranger as well, but I'm pretty sure he wasn't born yet. And Tom Wopat had just been born during the Lone Ranger's run on television. Here's a fun fact. Denver Powell played Johnny Crawford's TV dad before Chuck Connors did on The Rifleman, on an episode of The Lone Ranger. Of course, James Best and Denver Powell played on the Andy Griffith Show as well, so it's no surprise that Aunt Bee would show up on The Lone Ranger as a bad guy no less, and mean old Ben Weaver actor Will Wright also made it to The Lone Ranger.
Next time you take easy, John. Fight man. You fight woman.
Real-life brothers Dwayne and Daryl Hickman from the Dobie Gillis Show appear a couple of times apiece, and once on the same episode as the same character at different ages.
I resign anyway. You young pup, you're fired.
Before he was Matt Dillon on Gunsmoke, James Arnaz was only a deputy sheriff on the episode of The Lone Ranger entitled A Matter of Courage.
Hey, I better ask for my badge back. I'm gonna need a job.
The Lone Ranger was the star of two cartoon series, one in 1966 and one in 1980. The 66 version was more like the series Wild Wild West, incorporating elements of sci-fi, while the 1980 version was a more standardized Western version.
I'm known as the Lone Ranger.
The 1980 version was voiced by William Conrad, who had voiced Matt Dillon years before on a Gunsmoke radio show.
How's he going to keep the doc away such a long time? Not him getting suspicious.
Here's another tie-in to Gunsmoke. Dennis Weaver made an appearance on The Lone Ranger before he was Chester on Gunsmoke. Did you know the Lone Ranger Clayton Moore teamed up with everyone's favorite super dog on a 1959 episode of Lassie, entitled Peace Patrol?
Good girl, Lassie.
John Hart made a couple appearances on television in the 80s as the Lone Ranger.
Like it or not, our society needs its heroes.
Are you the one they call the Fonz?
You know, it probably wasn't too hard to get the Lone Ranger on Happy Days, as Mrs. C, Marion Ross, had been on the Lone Ranger years before on an episode.
I'm afraid he's left. But I didn't get a chance to thank him.
In the late 70s, Clayton Moore was sued by the producers of the Legend of the Lone Ranger movie, preventing him from wearing the mask for a time. In my opinion, that was the primary reason no one went to see an otherwise decent movie. Sure, it didn't help the main star had to have all these parts redubbed by another actor, but the dirty way they did Moore was most likely the biggest reason. You know, I think a smart plan to bring the Ranger to modern audiences would be to make a movie true to the character of the Lone Ranger, with bigger action and adventure, of course, keep the budget under control, and they wouldn't have to make as much as they needed in 2013 to be profitable. Just my opinion.
Say, wait a minute. Haven't you ever heard of the Lone Ranger?
The Lone Ranger?
Sure a fine fellow, mask and all. I wonder who he is. Well, Tonto's horse is gone. Who's Tonto?
In no time at all, you'll be the most successful.
Iris, I'm a doctor, not a politician.
Probably the most likable and down-to-earth member of the Star Trek cast, despite having flown all over the galaxy, was DeForest Kelley. He was an extremely low-key and private individual who preferred not to seek leading roles and not to be involved in the Hollywood lifestyle.
What is that, Doctor? I like them better than I like you.
In real life, as a teen, he sang at the Baptist church where his father was a minister.
You're an actor, not a singer.
At one early point in his life, he actually wanted to become a doctor, but they didn't have the money to send him to medical school.
What am I, a doctor or a moon shuttle conductor?
I'm a doctor, not an engineer.
No, you're an engineer. Look, I'm a doctor, not an escalator. Spock, give me a hand.
Not a magician, Spock. Just an old country doctor. I'm a doctor, not a coal miner. No, I'm a doctor, not a mechanic.
You're a doctor, not a doctor. A condemned murderer.
Kelley preferred westerns to sci-fi, believe it or not. He was on the Lone Ranger 3 times as 3 different characters. Once as a doctor, of course.
I'm glad you're here. Are you the doctor? Yes, I am.
Kelley portrayed 2 different men in the legendary 1881 OK Corral gunfight between the Earps and the Clantons. In '55, he played Ike Clanton in an episode of the series You Are There in 1955. And in 57, he played Morgan Earp in the movie Gunfight at the OK Corral. On Star Trek, he found himself at the OK Corral again. This was in the 3rd season episode, Spectra of the Gun.
We're talking like we really are in Tombstone, Arizona in 1881.
Precisely. I'll tell you one thing. You better be ready to make a fight of it today.
Next, we look at the Green Hornet, his TV series, and his relation to the Lone Ranger. The following portion of this video is from my previous Green Hornet video that I uploaded a while back. Just a few quick character facts and history in case you weren't familiar with the Green Hornet's origins. The Green Hornet was created in 1936 by George W. Trindle and Fran Stryker. His secret identity is that of Britt Reed, who is the publisher of the Daily Sentinel newspaper. The twist is that the Green Hornet is considered a criminal to the world at large, so that he can infiltrate the underworld. His partner is, of course, Kato, who drives the Hornet's car, Black Beauty. In the original radio version of the Green Hornet, Britt Reed is the son of Dan Reed Jr., the nephew of the Lone Ranger. Dan Reed, according to the original story, had actually rode with the Lone Ranger. During the Lone Ranger TV series around 1955, the character Dan Reed Jr. actually replaced Tonto for a few episodes, as Jay Silverheels was recuperating from a heart attack. Dan was played by stuntman Chuck Courtney.
Dan, freedom of the press carries a great amount of responsibility. Good reporting covers both sides of a story.
Since the Hornet's creation in the early 30s, he's had multiple comic series, the TV series of course, 2 movie serials, and a motion picture. In the episode, The Frog is a Deadly Weapon, Britt Reed gives a possible reason for having gotten into crime fighting.
That Glenn Connors may still be alive. He was one of the men who framed my father.
In the episode, Eat, Drink, and Be Dead, I read that this helicopter was actually used in the 1966 Batman movie. Of course, in the close-ups you can tell that the men aboard the helicopter are in a studio. In the episode, May the Best Man Lose, a white vehicle is parked right beside Scanlon's car. After a bomb goes off in his car, the white vehicle appears to have just completely disappeared. In the episode Corpse of the Year, Part 1, the Green Hornet appears to be hanging out in Mayberry. In the background you can see Floyd's barbershop and the courthouse where Andy Taylor works.
Looking for me?
Later in that episode, Kato and the Green Hornet chase a phony Green Hornet all through the streets of Mayberry. Mayberry, as I've said in other videos, showed up on Superman, Batman, and even Star Trek in the 60s. The goof comes while Kato is driving through Mayberry, the entire time we see what looks like a busy big city night scene in Black Beauty's back window. Well, if it's not a big city, it's definitely not Mayberry. In the conclusion of that story, in Corpse of the Year Part 2, fake evil Green Hornet and a fake Black Beauty tries to run over the real Kato and Hornet and drives off a cliff. But for some reason that I can't figure out, the car explodes before it even hits the bottom and doesn't even look like the same model of car.
I never realized how much trouble one little bullet could cause so much trouble.
In the episode Bad Bed on a 459 Silent, a blooper was actually created by a bad edit of 2 different readings of Van Williams' line.
I never realized how much trouble one little bullet could cause so much trouble. You try me, Clark. Just try me.
Also in that episode, the Green Hornet is pointing his gloved finger at the dirty cops, but the next second, the glove is gone. Also in that episode, it looks like the cop is landing on a stuntman's mattress, conveniently placed in the warehouse.
Aren't you jumping to conclusions?
But that's not all. Now notice where the 2 guys are fighting at. So just where in the world are those hands coming from?
Aren't you jumping to conclusions?
The next goof comes from the episode Alias to Scarf, which guest starred the Dracula actor and horror legend, John Carradine.
No.
It's true, I did find a goof in that episode.
Since you doubt the supernatural, let us say that you were mistaken.
Notice the Green Hornet and Kato wax replicas. Carradine, playing the villain of course, threatens this lady. Then suddenly the wax statues of the Green Hornet and Kato come to life and subdue the villain. But are we to believe that these statues were the Green Hornet and Kato all along?
I shudder, but I fear we shall have to accept what people have seen.
In the episode, Hornet Save Thyself, a sign has a grammatical error that totally makes its meaning unclear. The word two should have two O's, because now it sounds like they're saying that they won't work for people that are large. Hey, I'm not judging. I make spelling errors all the time. You might even find one on this video.
Nobody wants closing.
The actor Mako guest starred as a bad guy in the episode Praying Mantis. He had a lot of ties to superhero properties in his lifetime. He was the voice of Splinter in the animated Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film released in 2007, Highlander, RoboCop 3, Conan the Destroyer, The A-Team, Wonder Woman TV series, and the one that sticks out in my mind the most are the 2 episodes of The Incredible Hulk, where he played Lee Sung, a martial arts expert that tried to help David Banner. He was also in a hilarious episode of F Troop as a samurai warrior.
That's what I call a chop.
Of course, in this particular episode of The Green Hornet, he was no match for Bruce Lee. Years before James Best was chasing the Duke boys across Hazard County, he was living a life of crime. That is, until he came up against Green Hornet and Kato in the episode Deadline for Death. In the episode Ace in the Hole, Richard Anderson guest stars as a villain a few years before he was Oscar on The $6 Million Man. That particular episode contains this interesting scene.
Very funny.
Yeah, that was one of the strange things about Green Hornet and Batman. They never could make up their minds as to whether or not Batman and the Green Hornet were TV characters in each other's world or whether or not they actually existed. Everyone knows about the famous team-up between the crime fighters on the episodes A Piece of the Action and the second part, Batman's Satisfaction. But did you know that Batman was shown to have existed on the Green Hornet series, has a TV show on the episode The Secret of the Sally Bell in December of '66, before the famous team-up. A few weeks before that, in November '66, the Green Hornet was mentioned by Bruce Wayne as a TV series he wanted to watch, on the episode The Impractical Joker.
It's about time for the Green Hornet.
You're right, Bruce.
And before those strange TV series mentions, the Green Hornet and Kato made a cameo in the Batman episode The Spell of Tut in September of '66, where it seemed that both sets of crime fighters were aware of each other's existence.
Aren't you in the wrong city? On special assignment for the Daily Sentinel. You know my aide, Kato? Robin, the boy wonder.
Now in March of '67, when Batman and Green Hornet team up for a full 2-parter on the episodes A Piece of the Action and Batman Satisfaction, and Batman and Robin act as if they don't know that the Green Hornet and Kato are good guys.
The Green Hornet is in our fair city for a piece of the action.
Not a mention of having heard of each other's TV series either. It's like wholly confusing continuity, Batman. Or is it continuity? I'm never sure about these things. Batman doesn't even start to realize the Green Hornet and Kato might be good guys until the very end.
Maybe he meant to uncover the entire ring, who knows?
The Green Hornet, a crime fighter?
Okay, so maybe this team-up happened out of order, but how do you explain how Batman is just a TV series on the Green Hornet, and the Green Hornet is just a TV series on Batman? Well, I guess it's not above the realm of possibility that Hollywood would create their own fictionalized accounts of the Green Hornet and Batman within the Batman universe that didn't resemble the shows as we know them.
Wholly unlikely, but...
Or it was all just a giant goof done for laughs, and I shouldn't be taking any of this so seriously before my head explodes.
Have you short-circuited Batman's brain?
Also, in the episode A Piece of the Action, Batman is supposedly stuck on a giant glue pad, but it's only his cape that is actually against the giant glue pad. How is his arm stuck to the cape? All he had to do is walk forward and take his cape off. You know, it occurs to me that the team-up of the Green Hornet and Batman was likely the first live-action superhero team-up ever. I can't think of any others that might have happened apart from cartoons and comic books. Let me know if I'm right or wrong in the comments below. Here's some quick Bruce Lee trivia for you. I just read this one recently. It's been reported that Bruce Lee actually had terrible eyesight, and even more contacts.
Oh, don't keep that.
Bruce Lee had a lot of famous students, including Steve McQueen, James Coburn, James Garner, and Kareem Abdul-Jabbar. Steve McQueen and James Coburn were pallbearers at Lee's funeral. A lot of people have speculated over the years that Lee's death may have had something to do with painkillers, maybe even aspirin he took due to a lower back injury. But lately I've heard another theory that said that he had his sweat glands surgically removed from his armpits, and that it may have contributed to his untimely death by heat exhaustion. Of course, Lee created Jeet Kune Do, his own martial art, after the Green Hornet was canceled. He believed in weight training, but he focused his workouts and his diet as to not become bulky, as he feared it might hinder his lightning fast speed. Now, Lee is considered to be the most influential martial artist of all time. His reported level of strength and punching power greatly surpassed his physical size. I've always been fascinated by tales of Bruce Lee's abilities. Of course, with the internet and everything, it's hard to tell what is true and what is not. For sure, Bruce Lee is now as much a legend as he is a fascinating figure in entertainment history. He's inspired millions over the years since his death, both in fitness and in martial arts. TV Crazy Man here. In this video, we look at some interesting goofs from one of the greatest animated series of all time. Plus a quick look at the awesome monsters of the show and some fun facts on this unique series from the 1960s. Jonny Quest is known for its amazing art that looks like it was lifted right out of a superhero comic book. But Hanna-Barbera had a strict schedule, which meant a few goofs slipped by for the sake of getting the episodes done on time. In the first episode, The Mystery of the Lizard Men, it looks like they couldn't decide if this submarine bad guy has on gloves or not.
Maintain strict silence.
Here they colored in his hands as if he were wearing gloves, and yet they still drew in his fingernails. In the episode Arctic Splashdown, Johnny, Haji, and Race are locked up in the back of this vehicle. After an explosion, we see the gang in the same vehicle with no doors. And then we see them again from the inside, and the doors are shut. Could be a creative license thing to show us what's happening inside during the explosion, but I'm not sure. What do y'all think? Was it a mistake, or was it intentional?
You know the answer to that, Johnny. We need your valuable assistance, Dr. Quest.
Also in this episode, one of the outfits of one of the bad guys changes colors from one scene to the next. Probably just a consequence of being in a hurry and having an entire team working on the show at the same time. In the episode Double Danger, Race, Haji, Johnny, and Bandit are riding in a Jeep. But as they round a curve, they are no longer drawn in their usually detailed manner, and Johnny's hair has even changed colors. I guess they were trying to take advantage of the smaller television sets they had back then, guessing that nobody would notice the characters no longer had, faces. Also, the Jeep's wheels disappear for a split second. It's amazing what you notice when you slow things down just a little bit. In the episode Shadow of the Condor, first Bandit is outside a basement window looking in on the evil Baron, but from the interior shot, Bandit can't be seen. And even when Johnny and Haji begin looking in, they too are missing from the interior view of the outside. In the episode The Dreadful Doll, Race is held prisoner by Fred Flintstone. I'll explain that later. So Race is held in a room where the door opens to the inside of the room. Now there is a guard that the boys distract easily with rocks, but why does Race have to wait for Johnny to remove the board on the outside of a door that opens to the inside of his room? A board that is not visibly attached to the door in any way. See, the board's only attached to the door frame, not the door itself. Also in this episode, notice that the girl is sitting right next to both Johnny and Haji. But when the camera view switches to a close-up, Haji isn't there anymore. And then the camera switches back and he's back to where he was again. The animators were probably just trying to save a little time by cutting corners, just a little bit in this scene. Now this one I'm not completely 100% sure on account of the fact I've never been on a submarine before, or have shot off any torpedoes from a submarine, for that matter. But does it make sense that Race could shoot off the #1 torpedo twice, or were the animators just trying to save time drawing? On the episode Dragons of Ashita, Dr. Quest has Race Bannon's voice in one scene. At first in this scene, Dr. Quest sounds like his old self, voiced by Don Messick in this episode.
No idea why that native would be so afraid of you?
Then on his next line, his voice changes over to Race, voiced by Mike Rowe.
He spoke of dragons.
No idea why that native would be so afraid of you?
He spoke of dragons.
In the episode Werewolf of the Timberland, Dr. Quest's voice comes out of Race.
Look, I think he got away. Look, I think he got away.
In this episode, this dinosaur-looking bird is walking towards Dr. Quest and Race. And all of a sudden, he's instantly in mid-flight. In the episode Pirates from Below, when Haji levitates Johnny, he also somehow changes Johnny's socks from white to blue. Believe it or not.
Hey, Haji, that's enough. Let me down.
In the episode Attack of the Tree People, Dr. Quest and Race are playing chess. When the boat catches fire, Quest and Race are still in position staring intently at the chessboard and its pieces that have disappeared from the table. In the episode The Invisible Monster, there's one scene where Bandit's chasing after Dr. Quest and Johnny's mouth doesn't move when he calls after Bandit.
Bandit, come back here! Bandit, come back here!
On the episode The Devil's Tower, a cable holding Dr. Quest's balloon breaks, and as the balloon flies up to a mountain, the cable is there, but when it reaches the top, the cable is gone, but then the cable is back a few seconds later. I wonder, also from this episode, that was fruit the monkey threw down on Bandit, wasn't it? I hope. In this episode, Dr. Quest is doing that thing again, where he borrows Race's voice for a second.
I see him. I see him.
When Race and Quest catch up to a crook named Lieutenant Singh, his clothes are blackened from a car crash, but then he looks perfectly clean, and then he's back to being dirty again. Kinda makes me wonder if two different artists were involved here. In the episode Monster in the Monastery, Johnny can't make up his mind if he wants to wear his red winter coat or just his black shirt.
Shoot! Kill them! Kill them!
Excuse me.
I have one of them!
Now, lest you think all of Jonny Quest was filled with nothing but goofs, let's check out some of the awesome stuff from Jonny Quest.
Oh man, I'm glad that's over.
Let's remember those amazing monsters from the show.
Yippee! Hooray!
Jonny Quest featured some cool monsters that are obviously influenced by classic monster and sci-fi movies. Unlike the original Scooby-Doo, the monsters more often than not turned out to be real. Or maybe it might be men in costumes at first and then a real monster would be revealed at the end, just to keep you on your toes. When I was a kid, I remember particularly loving the episode that featured the robot spy created by Dr. Zen. The '82 Incredible Hulk animated series mirrored that episode, only theirs turned out to actually be from space. The series featured episodes with a mummy, a sea creature that reminds you of the creature from the Black Lagoon, and giant animals enlarged by a mad scientist. Besides monsters, you gotta love those jetpacks. Okay, now let's look at some fun trivia facts.
Alright, you guys, let's move it!
Remember when I said Race was held prisoner by Fred Flintstone earlier in this video? Well, Henry Corden, the second voice of Fred Flintstone, did 15 episodes of miscellaneous voices for Jonny Quest.
You're pretty sharp.
He did miscellaneous voice work on the original Flintstones on 15 episodes. He inherited the voice of Fred Flintstone after the first Fred, Alan Reed, passed away in '77. He went on to do the voice of Fred for nearly 3 decades on various cartoon series, animated specials, and cereal commercials. He was performing as Flintstone until about 3 months before he died at the age of 85 in 2005. Mike Rowe, of course, was the voice of Race Bannon.
What a mess. That monster must have been here too.
Mike Rowe also did the voices of other famous characters such as Reed Richards on the 1978 Fantastic Four cartoon, and another white-haired hero named John Butler on the Valley of the Dinosaurs. That was a favorite of mine. He also did a lot of voices on various other shows including Speed Buggy and Captain Caveman. Tim Matheson has had a very long successful career. He's been on movies like the Brady Bunch sequel, The Apple Dumpling Gang Rides Again. He's even played Ronald Reagan once. He was approximately around 16 years old when Jonny Quest first aired.
I better go find my dog.
Now, believe it or not, he's 76 years of age.
Johnny, look, trap.
Danny Bravo, who voiced Haji, retired from acting many years ago. His last listing in IMDb was around 1969, and that was doing voice work on a couple of episodes of Hanna-Barbera's The New Adventures of Huckleberry Finn. And that's an interesting series. It mixes live action with animation and starred Ted Cassidy from the Addams Family as the villain every week.
I managed to activate the destruction mechanism before we left.
Dr. Quest was voiced by two different actors, John Stevenson and Don Messick. Stevenson only did a few episodes before Messick took over, but he did a ton of work for Hanna-Barbera before and after Jonny Quest, including doing the voice of Mr. Slate from the Flintstones.
Boulder Avenue? That's where I live.
Don Messick did a lot of cartoon voice work as well, of course.
Race, do you think you can take the truck into Cuba Bon and rent a plane?
He was most famously known as the original voice of Scooby-Doo. The reason why Jonny Quest feels like a comic book come to life is that it was created by comic book artist Doug Wildey, who worked at Marvel Comics when it was still known as Atlas Comics, and he also did some work for DC too. He did work on a lot of other cool projects like Herculoids, Return of the Planet of the Apes, Mr. T, the Godzilla Power Hour, and Chuck Norris' Karate Commandos. Well, I guess we're out of time this time around, but if you want more on Jonny Quest, let me know and I'll see what I can dig up later in the future for the TV Crazy Man channel. Please hit like, share the video, and subscribe, of course, if you haven't already. Also, I'd like to take a quick moment to remind you of my animated channel featuring some of my own original characters. It's the Freddy Cat Cartoons channel. I think reviewing Jonny Quest has given me some ideas for later on down the line, but for now the channel is mostly, comedic in nature. I really appreciate you checking that out, and maybe consider subscribing to that channel as well.
You may have a thought there.
Thanks so much for watching, and have a great day.